Hi, this is Jeff Liu, and I'm the producer and director of Killer Bean Forever. And so, why don't we just go right into this commentary? So, this first scene is basically a remake of Killer Bean 2. I wanted Killer Bean Forever to happen right after Killer Bean 2, right after the party, and I wanted to tell the story of what happens right after this party and who Killer Bean is and why he did what he did. And here we have a bunch of breakdancing beans. You know, everyone who's in my generation was a fan of breakdancing, so yeah, it's pretty cool. This scene is this is a big dance number, and growing up wanting to be a director, I've always wanted to make a musical. I thought it'd be really fun to make, because it looks like, musicals. As a fan, as an audience member, you might not like musicals, but as a director watching musicals, I always say, man, that would be pretty fun to make a musical. But making a live action musical as opposed to an animated one is much different. So in reality, it's fun to think of, it's fun to watch, but to actually make it in animation was not that fun. But I'll talk about that in the other commentary. So here, I wanted the dance numbers to get bigger and bigger, and then I wanted it to be like an epic kind of dance choreography here. So as you saw, that whole shot up until here is one complete shot, and I think this shot lasted about 1 minute and 30 seconds.
Can you turn down the music? What? Can you turn down the music?
So all the voices in this scene were done by Vegas E. Tripp, and he's a really talented voice actor. He came up with a lot of different voices in this movie. And I think this scene shows off a lot of his range.
Come over there and turn it down myself. All right, sucker. You come down.
So I had to show that the beans were actually a threat. I had to show that these were not just some partying beans. So I had him pick up the gun and kind of insult Killer Bean. Because Killer Bean, what he does in this is, it's not what good guys do, right? So if this is going to be the hero of the movie, I don't know if it justifies his action, but it makes it, I don't know, not such a, I don't know. It's hard to explain. I don't know if it's, if I should explain or not. But yeah, I made all the guys have guns, and I wanted to show that all the beans have guns. So Killer Bean's not just going in and starting, and just shooting up everyone in the party. So I just wanted to show that these beans have bad intentions and they're just partying at this moment, but eventually they'll use their guns for something else. So this whole action sequence, I wanted it to be really gritty. I thought the action I had in Killer Bean 2 was it was quite choreographed, I should say. This is a lot more organic, a lot more gritty, and I wanted that whole intense kind of feel to it. So there we have some shotgun blast. I always love how if they do it right in movies, how shotgun blasts are portrayed with all the what do you call it, the pellets going everywhere. And here Killer Bean's using different props to actually get his opponent. And being a basketball fan, everyone knows that move from the Slam Dunk Championships. And this part, I thought it was really... I wanted Killer Bean to kind of walk away from this explosion. One, to show how calm and cool he is, and two, to show, his expertise, to show that he knew how big the explosion was going to be, so he was in the perfect distance to be just out of range of that explosion. So that's kind of foreshadowing on the next few scenes, showing Vagan on the phone. And Killer Bean's gun was my own design. I always thought it would be cool to make a gun that was sort of like a samurai sword. You know how samurai swords, the handlebars are very decorated, and I thought it'd be cool to show like a dragon with this mouth open right at the barrel of the gun. And whenever it shoots, it looks like the dragon's breathing fire. So, yeah, it turned out well. In my head, it was like, it was just an idea. But after I drew it a few times, I thought it was pretty neat. So I don't know what you guys think, but I think it's pretty cool. But anyway, so this title sequence was not what I originally intended it to be. I wanted a very big city scene, like a city montage of a camera flying through big buildings and skyscrapers, and like the cast members, their names would be objects on the building sides. But that, after a while of thinking about it, I said, well, that's gonna take a lot of time to do this scene. So everything in this title sequence was done in particle illusion, and is pretty much right out of the box kind of effect. So it didn't take too much time to do that. And here we're going into another scene. This is immediately after, well, not immediately, maybe an hour after the action sequence. So it's kind of a early morning, maybe like 4 a.m. or something like that. And right here, I wanted to give Cromwell kind of a hero-like introduction, so we don't really know who he is right now. And then in the next shot, he comes out from like out of focus into and steps into focus. Maybe I should have pushed out of focus moment a little bit more, but yeah, that's my kind of like film noir intro for Detective Cromwell. And how I got his name, Detective Cromwell, it's really the first name I came up with. I thought Cromwell was kind of a cool name, so I said, okay, let's just stick with it. I planned on changing it, but it just stuck. And a few of the names in this movie kind of just stuck like that. We'll get to another character pretty soon. So here's all the damage from the party. And this scene, I wanted to introduce what Cromwell was about. And we find out that Cromwell is really, all he's really about is he wants to bring down Cappuccino. So this whole scene, he's actually pleased that this happened. So that was the whole purpose of me making this scene. And also to lead into Vagin, which we'll see pretty soon.
This is a gang war. Cappuccino's beans might be dumb, but they know how to use a gun.
So Detective Cromwell is played by Brian Session, who's a very good voice actor. And he did a lot of video games and lots of different voice roles, voice acting roles, and he really pulled off Detective Cromwell.
I can live with this.
Detective Cromwell, I found something here.
So that tire tread texture was rather difficult to do. I mean, I couldn't really photograph a skid mark, so I had to do a bunch of cheats in Photoshop. I guess this is just more for the animation part of it, so why don't I leave it for that? Just came to my head right now. So you see a lot of depth of field in this scene, and depth of field was really important to me to get that cinematic look, to get that real cinematic feel to this movie. So I ended up using true ray trace depth of field, and
Let's go.
it was really the only way to get that quality depth of field look.
This is the police! Hold it right there!
Bad idea.
So here we have this this car come up, and I wanted this to be another kind of grand entrance for another character.
Get out of the car! Get your hands where I can see them! Easy, easy.
So this is Vagin. Vagin is also played by Brian Session, and yeah, I thought he did an excellent job. So Vagin is he's basically the henchman of Cappuccino, and he's dealt with Detective Cromwell before, so he's not very scared of him, which is apparent in this scene.
Don't you mean Cappuccino's property? You know,
What I like in movies is a lot of confrontation. I like character versus character, not necessarily like a fight, but I like personality versus personality.
Action here?
You know, like the whole,
Action.
you know, guys showing off how macho they are against each other just with words, you know.
I'm shooting you with this.
They don't necessarily have to have weapons in their hands. So this scene is kind of a first of many face-offs you'll see in this movie. Maybe I overdid the amount of face-offs.
Are you kids done yet?
I say we take him in and book him right now.
You know my lawyers will have me out even before you get me to the police station. The time's not worth your effort. Now, is it, Cromwell?
So when writing this, writing a lot of scenes in this movie,
Said let him go.
you really had to. I really had to step into each character and think about how each one was going to outdo the other. So this scene was very much like that, and a few other scenes are like that in this movie, where I think I'm playing Vagan,
Else we find.
and how am I gonna like bust on Detective Cromwell? Maybe I'll say this. I'll say, "Oh, you can't touch me because my lawyers are gonna get me out," and then after I say that, then I jump into Detective Cromwell's shoes, and then I think, okay, yeah, he said that he has lawyers, but how am I gonna get him back? Maybe I'll just say, yeah, okay, forget the lawyers. We're just gonna look in your warehouse. So it's a lot of back and forth, a lot of like, you know, circling each other, ready to pounce on each other type of thing. It's a lot of strategy involved in the dialogue. So, but you also have to flow it to end the scene somehow. You just can't keep going back and forth, you know. So it's fun. Screenwriting is fun. So it's fun to jump into these characters' roles and see how they would react to what someone else would say. So this scene, I wanted to show just how close Killer Bean was to the party, and that's why this is a very long shot, a very long traveling shot. And here you see Killer Bean on top of his bed, and originally I wanted him to be naked when he's sleeping, and then later on he puts on. I would show him put on his vest and maybe his shoes, but I really thought about it and I said, how much does that really add to show him put on clothes? Because it's really hard to do. It's really hard to animate. So I said, okay, let's skip it. Let's have him sleep in his clothes. And maybe it shows that he's like, doesn't really care about comfort. You know, he just jumps into bed and sleeps. That's just an excuse for my laziness. But yeah, it would have been too difficult to show him putting on clothes. So I said, it's not that important. I'll just skip it. It's not really the point of this scene. You got to think about what's the point of your story, what's the point of your scene. And this moment here, it's kind of like an uncomfortable moment, showing the scope, like the crosshairs on Police Beans. But you know, I wanted the audience to really think: is Killer Bean a bad guy or is he a good guy? You know, in my head, I knew his intention. His intention was really to use the scope as a binocular to get a closer look at what's going on down there. But you know, I played around with what the audience would think about who Killer Bean was. Here's another depth of field shot using rack focus.
Playtime's over.
I try to use the camera as another storyteller. Times where I'll push in or I'll reveal objects or rack focus, you know, or pan around. I try to tell the story with the camera separately from the dialogue, so when it's combined, it works even more. Music's also very important here. You hear a soundtrack here, which kind of adds to the mood, and you know, I think filmmaking is all about everything, how everything comes together. The lighting, the camera work, the acting, the music, the writing, everything has to come together to make it a cool scene. So it's all about the flow, all about the mood, you know?
I'll still get the job done. I'll get him.
We're running out of time.
So in this movie, you'll see a lot of people talking on phones and speaker phones, and that's really, as a producer, you know, I have to,
I'll call you when I
in a way, reduce the budgets, make the schedules a lot quicker. So whenever you see someone talking on a phone, that's because I don't have to animate the second character. I could just animate one character, and the other character is just a voice, you know, just a voice on a phone, or where you can just imagine what he's gonna look like. Here's Jet Bean, another kind of grand introduction. I don't know, you know, he's kind of mysterious. We don't really see who he is yet. And here I wanted it I wanted to make a point that he has the same kind of phone, slightly different theme going on his screen, but it's the same exact phone as Killer Bean.
Urgent mission in Beantown.
But in this scene, I didn't want to make it clear on what his mission was. I kind of wanted to
Mission is highly sensitive.
kind of lead the audience to thinking that Jet Bean is actually going to help Killer Bean, or he's actually going to finish Killer Bean's mission for him. But you know, I didn't want people to think that Jet Bean's whole mission was in the end to get Killer Bean. And hopefully you guys seen the movie already, so I didn't give away anything.
Wait, are you leaving?
So in this scene, I did all the voices.
How long will you go for?
Because you know, when auditioning a lot of actors, I asked them if they could do Asian voices, and you know, being Chinese, some of the actors, it was really funny. You know, I knew what I was getting into, but some of it was a little like offensive, but it was really funny. In the end, it was all funny. Some of the voices, some of the accents that they pulled off. Yeah, I was cracking up. But I felt like to do this scene justice, I had to do all the voices, because some of it was like pretty much over the top, you know, and I just had to be the guy to take the brunt of being all Asian, you know what I'm saying? So here I wanted to show some action, just a little bit more action before we go into the moving the story along kind of scenes.
It's on the house. You don't have to come back, please.
And here we have Cappuccino's big penthouse office. And designing this office, I wanted it to be like a modern mafia office, you know, like how would a mobster's conference room look like? So it's pretty modern. It has like onyx bricks on the walls, and it has marble tiles and very shiny mahogany tables and leather chairs, and also has gold trim on the wall, like on the walls, like the bottoms and tops of the walls. So that's basically my idea of like a gangster, modern day kind of rich gangster type of thing. And in this movie, every bean who's not a main character is pretty much an idiot. So all these extra beans here, they're pretty much dumb beans, and they're there for you know, just comedy relief and just being being silly, you know. So this whole sequence here is just a big comic relief scene.
What's the problem?
And when I was writing the screenplay, I wanted a lot of jokes that I thought was funny to the normal working person. So like the whole out for jury duty thing, you know, it's an excuse not to be at work, even though if you're really out for jury duty, it's not really, you know. I don't know which would you rather be in, but yeah. The whole like as you'll see here, like the whole being laid off in this kind of economy. I kind of riddle the whole screenplay with those kind of jokes where, you know, if you're like me or anyone else who works all the time, you kind of like laugh at these little things. All right, maybe being laid off is not such a laughing matter, but you know, over here I try to, you know, it's a different kind of laid off here.
Will I be eligible for unemployment?
And that right there, another one of those, you know, working jokes. Will I get unemployment? You know, oh, well, it's a question everyone has when they get laid off. You know, how would I get like my unemployment?
Is my batting average going to go up after this?
So here you have popular culture of today. Someone just playing on video games, not paying attention to anything that's going on. You know, their head's glued into that little gaming device. So yeah, you know, I used to be one of those guys who were just stuck my head in my video games, and you know, it was cool. I didn't hear anything else that went on. So
That bean is nothing but a kiss-ass brown loser.
so here's more of who Vegan is.
He's making millions of dollars selling
Just trying to, you know, move the story on
something.
who these characters are.
Oh, it's great to see you, Vegan. But you have to excuse me. I mean an important...
So Cappuccino was voiced by Matthew Tyler, and he just really, I believed he nailed the voice that I wanted. I wanted a real, like, you know, Scarface type of voice, like
No, it's not about the party.
you know, that kind of voice, pretty much. The voice that you hear right now, that's what I wanted. So I thought he did a really excellent job.
Who is this?
I have reason.
So here we use a lot. Well, I tend to say we a lot, but it's really I use a lot of depth of field here, just for artistic effect. You know,
Bean?
focus on the characters, on their eyes, and the seriousness of this whole scene.
Who the hell is he?
One thing that depth of field also does is in those past few shots,
Is it a friend?
there was those extra beans in the backgrounds.
It has to be one of the competitors.
So I really pushed the depth of field so that,
I want you
you know, I didn't really have to animate them. I mean, some people might say, oh, those beans in the back, they're not really moving, they're just sitting there. But hopefully the depth of field kind of,
Somewhere out there.
you know, detracted from that and put your focus on what the characters who are in focus here.
We need to consolidate all of our warehouses. There's too many targets for him to attack. Move all our inventory to the central warehouse on Main Street.
So in this scene, Vegan is trying to convince Cappuccino to give him the resources so that he can go kill Killer Bean. It's more of those. It's more that everyone has a goal, everyone has an agenda. So in this scene, Vegan's agenda is, okay, get me who I want,
Any way you
so I could do what I want to do, not necessarily what you want me to do. And of course, Cappuccino just tells him what he wants. So.
put it on my credit card, okay? Just do it.
Yes, sir.
Vegan,
So, you know, when writing the screenplay, it was kind of
find out who signed
like a thing where, you know, when you watch a movie and you find out something in the end where you're like, oh, did he really know that throughout the whole movie, or were there clues that this kind of could happen? So I kind of wrote it that way. I mean, I don't know if anyone will ever go back and rewatch it and say like, oh yeah, Vegan knew all this whole time what was going on, you know. So I kind of wanted to write it that way. So here's another scene where it's one character and a speakerphone. So it's a very simple scene to make. You know, as a producer, it's really easy to make. But I had to spice it up with a lot of interaction with the monitor, the computer monitor. Originally, I had just Cromwell and the speakerphone, and it got really boring. So I said, okay, I gotta spice this up. I gotta put some action in the scene. So I have a lot of footage in the monitor. And I'll talk about that kind of stuff in the next commentary. But yeah, before that, this scene was really, really boring. So I hopefully put some more imagery in there to kind of like give your eyes more things to look at, so the scene goes by a lot quicker. This scene is basically a you know, one of those, okay, you know, Killer Bean is a lot worse than you think he is, and
Yeah, or he's bragging.
you know, who is Killer Bean?
As Killer Bean has to be working for someone to get that kind of financial backing. You think he's a gun for hire?
Or he could be a vigilante.
So this scene, I had both actors recording their voices at the same time. I didn't record their voices separately, and I thought that was really important to get the whole chemistry between the two voices, you know, the two actors, so that they can play off each other, and it's not just one actor playing off another without the other actor ever reacting, you know. I really wanted that whole dynamic, and it really worked out a lot better because the whole creativity, the whole like improv of what the actors wanted to do was there. So this car was designed by Von Caberte. He's a very good concept artist. He also designed all the main characters in this movie. And I gave Von a description of what I wanted, and he just drew it up, and yeah, that was it. This is I love that shot there. It's like a slow motion looking at the guns kind of thing. Might be cliched, but it's cool. I like it. This is a really deep depth of field shot here. This shot took a long time to render. Nice look at the dragons there. I didn't want to overdo looking at those dragon guns too much because we see it a lot. So hopefully this empty warehouse was a surprise to some of you fans out there. But I hopefully don't disappoint for those of you expecting a gunfight. And this was really one of the last scenes that I made in this movie. Production-wise. Originally, this scene was just him going into an empty warehouse, and there's nothing, and he leaves and he sees that note. But I said, that's really boring. This movie's been, we're kind of half an hour into it. We need more action here. So I thought putting a vegan Killer Bean battle would be more significant than just Killer Bean versus more Bad Beans. Showing that Vegan is also very competent in his, killing abilities, in his military tactical abilities. And showing that Killer Bean is not necessarily the guy who can kill everyone. Basically, it shows like these guys ended in a tie, pretty much. So I thought the music in this scene really, really helped out the action because it was like a really beat down kind of music to it, and I thought it was pretty cool. So here's that note I was talking about.
Time for some breakfast.
So here we see a lot of depth of field in action here. I'm a big fan of depth of field. And this is, that note was basically to spark more curiosity out of the audience. Who's Shadow Bean? We never heard of Shadow Bean before.
What'll it be?
So I wanted people to start thinking, who's Shadow Bean? Who's he talking about, right? So
Detective Cromwell, concerning possible suspects, rumors have surfaced that there is a vigilante Bean in town who is hunting down Captain.
So this bar is actually one of the very first sets I built in 3D. So it has a lot of attention to detail. Maybe more than other scenes because since it was the beginning, I kind of had plenty of time to make it. The others, I have not so much time, So here we have, it's kind of like you can already see what's going to happen. Cromwell arrives at the same scene as where Killer Bean is, and he already has his gun drawn. And Killer Bean looks like he's not really going anywhere. So we're going to have that confrontation pretty soon. And right here, I wanted to build it up even more. So Cromwell sees him, he hones in on him. Then we get that whole like slow motion walk going to the confrontation, gun drawn. So now you see Cromwell piecing everything together. He sees the hole in the warehouse, he sees Killer Bean, he sees the car. He's putting it all together. So this is one of the few acting moments without dialogue. in the entire movie. So that bell shot was kind of repeated to show that there's another person in this bar, and Killer Bean basically knows that someone just entered, but he doesn't really turn around. He doesn't really care.
What can I get you?
I'll have what he's having.
And like the Cromwell Harry scene, the Cromwell Killer Bean scene was recorded with both actors in the same room at the same time. And this was a really, really important scene to do that because the actors really played off each other. That's that was inspired by Hard Boiled.
Doesn't matter who comes in.
I think it was
Isn't it against police
one of those great John Woo movies. I'm a huge John Woo fan.
I'm a detective. Our regulations are a little different. How'd you know I was with the police?
So this scene is basically
much uglier?
which character is going to get the upper hand. You know, Cromwell's trying to find information. He's trying to make Killer Bean spill the beans, you know, kind of, no pun intended, but, and Killer Bean's trying to figure out, I don't know, Killer Bean's really trying to get Cromwell off his back, you know, and show that he's not really a pushover.
Tell me what you know.
Oh, I know a lot. I know the Baker Street warehouse is open.
So we have a lot of give and take in the dialogue, you know.
12 beans in that warehouse last night. I know the
Cromwell's giving information here, then he's taking what Killer Bean gives him, you know. Now Killer Bean's taking what Cromwell's giving him.
I see this fancy car parked.
It's a lot of like
You don't look like your
taking what your opponent gives you and then throwing it back, you know?
belongs to you.
Well, it looks like you figured it all out.
So Killer Bean just called his bluff and said, "Oh yeah, you figured it out. Go ahead, just arrest me." Now it's up to Cromwell
Just reckless.
to react to that, you know?
Way I see
So this whole sequence, you notice I go behind their backs on these few camera shots.
bring anyone to back
It's a long scene, and they're both just sitting on the bar, behind the bar, and I kind of ran out of camera angles to do, so I said, okay, let's travel around these characters, travel behind their backs, so we're not so stuck on that one side of the bar. So this moment ups the ante. So Cromwell takes out his gun, Killer Bean takes out his gun. Now the guns are on the table, so it kind of ups that whole confrontation.
How can I
Here's another part.
have it against the
Thinking, reacting. Well, reacting, then thinking, you know, on Cromwell's part. Now Killer Bean reacting. So I really believe that reacting is almost always more interesting than acting, like the first action. The effect is much more interesting than the cause. So how a character reacts, people tend to see, you know, when two people are having a conversation and you're the third person watching, and someone says something that's like, "Oh, he did not say that, did he?" Everyone turns to look at the other person to see how they would react, and that's way more interesting to see how that other person will handle it, as opposed to that person that just, you know, spit out that line.
Now you see, I'm bound by the law. I've been working this Cappuccino case for over 3 years.
So in this scene, Cromwell's whole goal is really not to take down Killer Bean, is really not to arrest the guy who killed all those beans in that party. It's really to try to recruit Killer Bean, or to get Killer Bean to help him out, because you know, that's all he's really about. That's all his goal is, really, to take down Cappuccino.
You got the wrong bean. I'm not just some hired gun.
Who says I'm hiring you? You already
So
have
the,
a boss.
directing this scene with the actors was
Attention that you're getting from the
it was quite challenging as a director,
and the evidence says
because I really had a very specific idea on how the acting should be, but it's like, as a director, you can't really, you know, you can't tell people how to act. You know, you can't say, "Oh, and kind of perform the acting in front of him. That people, everyone hates how to be told what to do if that's your if that's what you do. Like I always hate being told how to animate by someone who's not an animator, right? It's better for them to tell the animator what they want and let the animator interpret. So this whole scene, I wasn't getting the performance I wanted, and I thought of a new kind of direction. I said, okay, pretend both of your guns are out on the table already, and you're both showing, your hardware. So play it that way. Play it like neither of you are going to back down. And I really thought both of these actors pulled it off like spectacularly. So yeah, I mean, quite proud of how it came out.
Slowly lower my gun. And I'm gonna go, alright? Alright?
So of course we can't take our guns out without using them, If you pull out a gun in a movie, most likely you're probably going to use it.
See? This is easy.
I actually wanted to show the bartender a lot more in this scene, but time constraints kind of cut him out. I really didn't work on him that much, and in the end, you don't really miss the bartender. I had a few little comedic snippets of the bartender, but the whole scene was quite long, and it was kind of flowing. I didn't want to break it up because I didn't want people to notice how long the scene was. So, of course, he comes back here in the end to create that 3-person standoff.
Your life depends on it.
So dramatic.
So yeah, you can't have an animated movie without bathroom humor. So there's my gratuitous bathroom humor moment right there. I kind of like bathroom humor, so it's pretty funny to me. So here you have standoff number, I don't know what number it is right now, but yeah, so since it was another standoff, I said, okay, you can't just keep making standoffs without anything happening, so eventually Killer Bean, puts him in his place. Stop sticking your gun in my face, you know what I'm saying? So there's a lot of depth of field in this, a lot of shallow depth of field in this scene.
So I'll have to do this instead.
So I used some camera shakes on those hit moments, and camera shakes really accentuate the impact. So whatever impact you're trying to show, if you shake the camera, it makes it look a lot more powerful.
We'll settle this later.
You're not as dumb as you look.
So this moment here, I was originally going to show Cromwell walk to his car, get in his car, take out his cell phone, start dialing, and then talk to Harry. But in my previs, I always had it as a cut, with the intention of animating it later on. But after a while, I said, why don't we just cut it, because no one really cares about seeing some being walk across the street and getting in his car. That stuff is really boring. So let's just wipe to this next scene and, get the scene going already. Let's just start doing it. Let's not waste time now.
The Shadow Beans.
Harry, what's going on?
They're highly trained operatives of an organization called the Shadow Agency.
So this is another one of those simple scenes where
Government agency?
I only show one character.
I think they were a private
And it kind of works, because
some things
you're seeing Cromwell's reaction to whatever Harry says. Harry's saying,
Shadow Agency was one
this Killer Bean is
when diplomatic
it's no
and military
joke.
things failed.
You gotta be
The Shadow Agency
worried about him. So I got to show Cromwell's reaction, and as you know how I feel about reaction shots, so it turned out better than I thought.
Great. But why here? What are the Shadow Beans doing in Beantown? And what could they possibly want with Cappuccino?
So this scene was longer than it was before, but for time's sake, I cut out as much dialogue as I could, just to get the whole movie moving along.
So do you think this Killer Bean is a Shadow Bean operative?
It sounds like he's certainly good enough to be.
Yeah, it's that's one thing to think about when you're making a movie. You have to think about the whole picture, the pacing of the entire movie, not just what happens in a scene, not just what happens in within like 3 or 4 shots, but you have to think about the pacing of the whole movie. So I was cutting a lot of stuff out towards the end of production just to speed up the pacing.
Dramatic entrance.
Bean, I hate this job.
And here we have another scene with the dumb bad beans. So
This is my dream job.
it's going to be another comedic scene. And this scene, all of these beans were voiced by Vegas E. Tripp, and he did an excellent job doing all these voices.
I don't know. I didn't really listen to that part. Hey, give me another beer.
Oh, here, have mine. I shouldn't
So
drink
that
anymore.
beer, I wanted it to be pretty gross. So I don't know if you could see it. There's like a big booger
Really bad cold.
on the top of that bottle. I don't know if it looks like a booger, if it looks like one to you, but so that probably wasn't successful. But the whole point was just to be a lot more disgusting.
He even killed Cappuccino's nephew.
Jeez. Who was this bean that killed everyone? Is he someone I should be worried about?
Nah, he's probably just some crazed lunatic running around with lots of guns. You know, that's the problem with this country. Too many crazed lunatics.
So,
with guns.
this is the whole ironic scene about gun-toting beans talking about gun control.
Real problem is the guns. What this
It's
country needs
pretty
is some
obvious, I
serious
guess.
Gun control. I mean, we need to take away all the guns, all of them, and just get rid of them. But not my gun.
So here's a Killer Beans dramatic entrance, and I always wanted this scene because you know how you see heroes crashing through glass windows and things like that, and they don't seem to get hurt when they land. I thought it'd be pretty funny if he actually crashed through a window and got hurt. So yeah, that's my idea of funny. So.
Bean, you dropped into the wrong place.
And I wanted, when I was first thinking or conceiving this movie in my head, I wanted Killer Bean to have a certain style of like breakdancing fighting, just like using breakdancing moves in a fight sequence. So that was one of them right there. And here's another standoff. So I was conscious about how many standoffs I had in this movie. So right there, I just ended it, and hopefully it was kind of a funny surprise. And here we have like more heavily armed beans. I think these are probably the most what do you call it? The most heavily armed beans Killer Bean has faced yet in this movie. So this scene, I wanted to create a new location for Vagan talking on the phone, but it's really only 2 shots, so I thought, why even build like a new location for Vagan? Okay, it's 3 shots, but so I used Cappuccino's office, his conference room, and I just made it nighttime, and Vagan's just standing in front of the window. So yeah, I thought it works pretty well. So the grenades I wanted to use to kind of mix up the action. I didn't want just shooting with guns all the time. I wanted Killer Bean to use different things. So there, I put some grenades in there. That the grenades gave me an opportunity to use different kinds of camera moves. So just tracking the body, and then handing off the camera to Killer Bean, and Killer Bean jumping onto the chair. And this is Killer Bean taking action to the beans, so that was one of my, I thought that was a cooler moment where he kicks him and does like a shot before he lands on the ground. That's kind of like a video game moment for like people who play fighting games where they keep punching the other character before the character even hits the ground. So this is a armored personnel carrier. I wanted to make it very big because I wanted it to hold a lot of beans inside, so it had to be pretty huge. And I wanted people to think that, man, Killer Bean's going to go up against this big thing. You know, I wanted it to be the opposing forces. I wanted the opposing forces to be a lot bigger than Killer Bean was. So this is one of the scenes from the previs. If you looked at the other special features on the DVD, this scene was a lot different, but the beginning was almost exactly the same, and I thought the music worked really well, so I just kept the music from the previs. And the actor who played this character was David Gilmet, and he's the same actor who plays Harry, Cromwell's friend, and he also plays the agency voice who talks to Killer Bean on the phone. So this was a cool character because we actually get to see David, well, his character on screen now instead of just being on the phone. He did a really excellent job on this.
Sure, we lost a few good beans.
So this scene, I kind of I wanted Killer Bean to be glazed over, but you couldn't really make him stand still, or else he'll look like a mannequin. So I had to add some kind of motion. So there's some mouth movement and very subtle eye movement.
Hostage extraction, corporate assassinations, preemptive surgical strikes, or just plain search.
There's a lot of depth field in this shot, in this scene, with showing the mercenary beans when we're close up on their heads. Yeah, I just like how the depth of field turned out.
Are you going to say something or what?
Huh? Oh, I'm sorry. I must have totally zoned out on you. Whoa, my eyes are starting to water. Whew. Sorry. Let's make one thing clear. Last night was a party. Tonight, I get to work.
So this whole action sequence was a lot different than the previous. So I basically just jumped right into this whole action scene when I was animating it, and I really had no previs to go on. So to have Killer Bean jump over those soldiers, I wanted to figure out how could I drop Killer Bean into the middle of the action. I wanted him to just drop in there and just started shooting in all directions. So that was my idea of how he would end up being right in the middle of that group of soldiers. And here you can't have, how I said earlier, you can't have a gun in a scene without actually using it. Well, here I couldn't just have the armored personnel carrier without using its big 50 caliber gun. So, I always hate in movies how when you see something cool, like, oh man, they have that big tank in the background. Oh man, I can't wait to see that. And they don't show it. I always hate that. So I wanted to definitely use the things I brought into the scene. And here I really felt the power of the gun really came a lot from the sound effect. It took me a while to find the right sound effect for this gun, but when I did find it, I was like, that's the 50 caliber. I gotta use that. And that's my bullet inspired from a video game shot. A lot of people probably know what video game I'm talking about. This little scene here, the whole motorcycle scene, I just loved how everything came together with the whole music, the whole action. I always wanted to do a scene with cool vehicles. Motorcycles are definitely one of the coolest vehicles you can have. And for me, going from fast motion to slow motion back to fast motion, it just shows a lot of contrast. And, you know, in art, or even in nature, contrast keeps everything interesting. So contrast in color, contrast in light and dark, contrast in speeds, you know, keeps everything interesting. Because if everything's fast, you know, you might just get too used to it and it'll get boring after a while.
Ah, well. It's worth a try. This is not a good idea. We should kill him now.
Patience, Vegan. I need answers. I need answers from him.
So, like how the first scene was a remake of The Party, Killer Bean 2, this scene is kind of a remake of Killer Bean 1. Not completely, not exactly a remake, but it's the same idea. Killer Bean is trapped, and we have to find out how he gets out of it, you know. So that was really the whole point on how does he escape this situation where he's tied up and he's surrounded by beans. So I always thought those are cool situations, you know. So that this situation's intensified by showing that Bean holding Killer Bean's guns. So, but we also know which guy Killer Bean has to kill to get his guns back. So it's more informational, I guess.
Okay, maybe you did.
What do you want, Killer Bean?
That whole slapping moment was it was really to show that Killer Bean is not all just a killer, you know. I wanted to show his funny side. I wanted to show that he's not always such a tough guy. He has faults. He definitely has faults, you know, so.
He was such a good boy. He wanted to be a DJ at some big nightclub. I told him, someday...
And this scene, he's kind of tied up with this weird kind of belt and a padlock. Originally, I wanted him wrapped up with chains or wrapped up with a really big rope, but in 3D, I thought that would be way too difficult to do. So I said, okay, let's make this easy strap and this easy leather strap, and that's really easy to make. So.
He's dead now.
Kill this Bean. He's wasting my time.
It's about time.
How does it feel to be killed by your own gun?
Funny. I was about to ask you the same thing.
So that was my idea of how Killer Bean escapes, and I had that idea since the beginning, and I always wanted to put it in, you know, since the beginning of writing the screenplay. So it actually stayed in the movie.
Dispatch.
This is Cromwell.
Roger, Detective Cromwell.
I need backup. I'm at 43.
So here we see Cromwell's plan, you know, his own agenda to take down Cappuccino, and if he's lucky, to take down Killer Bean too. You know, he's not such a nice guy either. Nobody's really nice in this movie.
How dare you? How dare you come onto my property looking to kill me? Who do you think you are?
So hopefully this moment here, this scene is a surprise to you guys out there. Hopefully people weren't predicting this, but I don't know if I gave enough clues for it to happen that Killer Bean is really after Vegan.
What the hell is going on? Just shoot him already.
It's complicated. Why don't you just beat it?
No, I'm quite interested to knowing why.
Fine. You want to die too? Believe me, it's no trouble at all.
Actually, I think that my estimated taxes are due soon. I like to stay on top of that stuff.
So that was another joke, kind of like a working person's joke, the whole estimated tax thing. I don't know anyone in my entire life who actually pays estimated taxes, but it's always there, and people have to pay it. But I never pay estimated taxes, so I always think that's funny. That this whole mafia guy is always, he's just kidding, of course, but it's a joke.
Nothing but the best for you, Dark Bean.
Yeah, I guess they finally learned it's gonna take them.
So I thought about doing a big fight scene between Vegan and Killer Bean. I had the idea in my head, but I thought,
I didn't betray anyone.
I left it out. Because on one hand, it would have been much more exciting to see these guys face off. The old versus the new. Former super killer versus the up-and-coming super killer. But in a way, how this ends, it almost shows you how much better Killer Bean is than every other Shadow Bean out there. Because the whole purpose of Vegan in this scene is to talk down Killer Bean. To find that moment. To talk to him enough. To try to delude his thoughts. For long enough for him to get a window to get a shot off at Killer Bean. And he gets a good chance here. And I really toyed with it. I was like, okay, in one hand as a producer, okay, if we just do this one quick shot and kill Vegan with one shot, that's really easy, right? It wouldn't takes really no time, right, to make this scene. As a director, I'm like, oh man, I want to show this really cool action sequence, but kind of as a compromise, showing Killer Bean and his speed and his ability to kill Vegan with just one shot, it really shows that Killer Bean really is all that,
To the very group of beings I had spent several years trying to take down. That was it for me.
Do you expect me to believe any of this? All I know is that you breached the agency's security and stole years of intelligence work.
I didn't steal.
And I know they always say you should show rather than tell. Ideally, I would like to show Vegan going through his whole history. Everything he's telling Killer Bean. I would love to just show that in a flashback scene, but that would just require so much more. Because I had to build the sets. I had to not only just animation. It's just building the models, building the scenes, the scenarios that Vegan's doing, and to just show like one or two shots of that, it just really wasn't worth it for me to do that. I rather focus on other things, like bigger scenes in the movie, like the big battle sequence you just saw in the fight scenes at the end, rather than showing a montage of different things where I had to spend a lot of time just modeling and lighting and rendering. Of course, you get this boring dialogue here, but it's like when you're really limited on time, when you're really limited on money, you just gotta pick your battles pretty much. To me, this scene wasn't that important. I would rather spend more time on the more important fight scenes, the more important action sequences, and make those better than making this scene better.
They know it's only a matter of time before you find out the truth about them. And if they can't control you now, how will they control you when you do find out? It's smarter for them to defuse you now before you become a bigger problem.
And believe it or not, this scene was a lot longer than it is in the movie. I did cut out a lot. So yeah, I'm sparing you guys, man.
Shadow Beans after me twice. They both failed. Think about it, Killer Bean. They want us both dead, and we're hard to kill. Regardless of the outcome of this mission, the agency gets what they want. Because one of us will be eliminated.
So here you see Cromwell kind of getting that opportunity to let Killer Bean have it, and now's his chance. Oops, didn't happen, so oh well. So the music here was done by Justin Durbin, and he's a really great composer. It's just the perfect music for like a death of a hero. A death of a legend. So I thought Brian really nailed the acting here. Really, like, Oscar-worthy acting here of Vegan dying.
I had to take the shot. I would have done more with my life than you ever will. Doesn't matter now. We're both dead beans.
Of course, Killer Bean's reaction was very important. It's very important to see what's going on in his head. So Cromwell got what he wanted. Not necessarily how he thought it would happen, but he definitely got what he wanted. And at this moment, he's changing his priorities to get Killer Bean, because now he believes Killer Bean is a greater threat to Beantown than anyone else. So this scene right here, when we see the whole intercutting between the two characters on the phone, I spent a lot of time just at night, just lying in bed, thinking how to cut, where exactly to cut in this sequence to make it make sense, but also try to fool the audience. You know, initially try to fool the audience, but also make sense that what's going on is happening at the same time, but we figure out what's going on with Killer Bean, and in the end we figure out what's going on with Jet Bean, so it becomes clear at the end. So the big pivotal moment, of course, is Killer Bean dropping the phone. He's not part of the Shadow Agency anymore.
I've always wanted to meet him. I'll call you when the job is done.
So I always wanted to know how one super killer who doesn't use guns would face off against another super killer who does use guns. You know, how would that battle be interesting? You know, how would it be equal? So we'll find out pretty soon. And here we find out what Killer Bean decides to do. Of course, that's usually his first reaction for everything. This is a really shallow depth of field shot, and these cars are actually very far apart. And you see that there's a lot of space in between, but the whole shallow depth of field and a whole long lens of the camera makes them look like they're really close together. And this music is done by Justin, and I just heard this song on his website, and I was like, man, this song is awesome. I have to use this song in my movie. So I licensed this song from him, and this is like the perfect song on the entire internet. You know, I had to definitely use this song. So now we have the makings of another big fight scene.
Drop your gun.
And I wanted everyone to really think that it was going to happen. Like, I wanted everyone to think that Killer Bean was going to engage with the police. And again, this music is done by Justin. More dramatic music. Pretty much all of the dramatic music in this movie was done by Justin, so I'm not capable of doing dramatic music.
What do you want, Cromwell? Coming to see if I did your dirty work? Well, he's right over there.
Yeah, he's dead all right. But you didn't kill him.
So in a way, it's like with Cappuccino dead, Cromwell really needs something to do. Because for the past few years in his career, Cappuccino was his job. Taking out Cappuccino was all he had to do every day. So now with Cappuccino dead, Cromwell needs something new to, you know, focus on, and Killer Bean happens to be that person, or that bean.
They're coming after you, aren't they?
But you know, in Cromwell's head and in the heads of all these police beings, they all know that even though they have everyone there with automatic machine guns, all of them know that Killer Bean can still basically wipe them all out. So it's a very tense scene, well, amongst these other beings here who's not named Killer Bean. So this was a sort of a tough scene to direct, I guess, in terms of camera. Because there's very little dialogue right here at this moment where Killer Bean figures out if he's going to give up or is he going to start blasting away. So I had it took a while to figure out what kind of shots I wanted to portray Killer Bean giving up in a dramatic way. Like he could go both ways, but we don't know which way until he actually does it. So reaction, it's all about reaction, right?
Quiet place to think.
So here we're putting, I'm putting Killer Bean in a situation that's a lot tougher for him. He's confined into this space, and as an audience member, we know that there's a guy coming after him, and Killer Bean is locked up in this one little room without his guns. So it just makes the whole the trouble or the problems for Killer Bean just go up exponentially as we get closer to the end of the movie. And you know how I said earlier that every bean who's not a lead bean is there for comic relief? So that goes the same for the cops. You know, this is for some lighthearted action / humor, I guess. So I wanted to make Jet Bean smart. You know, everyone's very talented in the Shadow Agency. Everyone is a super killer. But I also wanted some of them to be smart, to be like thinking killers. Killer Bean is not a thinking killer. He's very reactional. He's very rash. So to make the whole forces against Killer Bean even more daunting would be to make the killers or his enemies a lot smarter than he is. So Jet Bean could easily wipe out all of these cops, but his whole point in this scene is to find out where Killer Bean is. And since these guys aren't telling him, he has to switch up his strategy. So, you know, he has to use the cops to take him to Killer Bean. And here, I wanted everyone to think that Jet Bean was going to completely demolish that police bean in front of him. But it just never happens. But I wanted people to I wanted them to expect it, you know, because everything was very slow and deliberate. And I wanted Jet Bean to look in control the entire time. Even though he's on his knees with his hands on his head, I wanted him to look like he could just take both of them very easily. But he never does because he has other plans, you know. So here's Killer Bean and how he deals with being in prison. Just waiting for, knowing that someone out there is going to try to kill him. And I wanted to show the police station heavily fortified with these like heavily armed police beans. I wanted to show how bad Jet Bean is, you know? He's got to go through all these guys to get to Killer Bean. And there's Cromwell leaving. He's that's the last we see of Cromwell in this movie.
What do we got here?
Just some.
So here's another kind of directing / producing trick. I have the two actors acting off camera, and we have Jet Bean. We just see his reaction. So I save a lot of animation time on not showing those two talking characters, but I also get this extra plus on showing Jet Bean's reaction. And this action scene, this is one of the scenes where if I had more time and more money, I would definitely expand this scene, because this would be such a cool scene if I had those resources to show Killer Bean going up against all these police beans. But in interest of getting the movie done, I resorted to being cheap, just doing it all in sound effects. And I always hate when that happens in movies, because I'm like, man, kind of just show what's going on. I didn't want to see it. I want to see the action. But, in a way, going back to the reaction thing, we're seeing Killer Bean's reaction, but, that is, in reality, it's a cop-out. And if I had more time, I would definitely go back and show more of the fight between the police and Jet Bean, because Jet Bean is such a cool character. But here I have, the lights flashing, showing the power of Jet Bean. Just being like earthquake-like, having that much power to rattle the electrical system in the building, So I want that feeling of vulnerability on Killer Bean. He's unarmed, he's stuck in a room, he's definitely vulnerable. And the fact that Jet Bean is carrying his guns, that doesn't really help the situation. So in reality, Jet Bean could win right here. If he wants to kill Killer Bean, he could do it right now. But that's really not Jet Bean's personality. That's not his character. He doesn't do this job just for the sake of having a job, He does it because he enjoys the battle. He enjoys showing other beings that he is the best being in the entire world, the best fighter, the best killer in the entire world. So he wants to give Killer Bean the best chance to fight him how Killer Bean is used to fighting people. So now Killer Bean has the upper hand, or so he thinks he does. But we find out just how powerful Jet Bean is.
So you're the bean they sent to kill me.
So I wanted the fight to happen in a room like this, a very simple room, because it's like a boxing ring. I didn't want any outside deciding factors to decide this fight. I wanted a fair fight. Well, as fair as it could be in a life and death situation. But I didn't want any of the outside environment or the set to have any, a deciding factor in how the fight would come about. But whatever was in there, like the chairs or the bars, I try to use it creatively. Or should I say the beans in that fight try to use it creatively.
Realize how they're using us?
I can see you've been brainwashed by Doc Bean. He was a fool. No one Shadow Bean can threaten the agency.
But I'm no Shadow Bean.
So that move was inspired by Best of the Best. It's a great Taekwondo movie with some awesome Taekwondo action. So I saw that shot, that shot of Jet Bean doing the flying punch. Yeah, I kind of got that idea from Best of the Best. So this fight is if you're a fan of like mixed martial arts, you might see a lot of different styles in this fight, because I really wanted to show lots of different action. So you saw some taekwondo here, you saw some kung fu moves, and we have boxing in there, and I put in like some jujitsu, some wrestling. I wanted everything. I wanted this fight to be everything. You know, it's not just one style. So Jet Bean is definitely the fluid high flyer. You know, that kind of martial arts. Very disciplined, very precise. You know, just a guy who's been training his whole life. And Killer Bean is more of a brawler, you know, a guy who's done like street fighting, you know, military tactics, things like that. So a lot of what's in a fight, a lot of the effectiveness in a fight is really about the sounds. Because I could have one kind of punch with a really weak sound, and have the same punch with a really heavy sound, and of course the heavy sound wins. So a lot of the fighting scenes you see, the sound effects really do play a lot. And in this fight, I kind of wanted them to both stand their own ground. Eventually, I wanted Jet Bean to kind of overtake Killer Bean, but I wanted the whole, you know, going back and forth kind of thing. This moment, I really wanted in the fight. I wanted the whole, you know, thinking fighter. You know, I wanted them to size each other up. Like an intelligent fighter will figure out how to play another fighter, you know. So here you see kind of like testing the waters, you know, figuring out what each fighter is going to do. And if you just had plain old action of just, you know, fists and feet just flying around, after a while it gets boring. So you really need that kind of human element, the whole thinking element in a fight scene. Just to show that these two characters are really like living beings, and they're thinking living beings, not just two animals going at it. There you go, a wrestling move for all you wrestling fans out there. So here I put in some judo here with that flip, and then some jujitsu here with the arm bar. I mean, a lot of people who aren't into mixed martial arts won't know what this arm bar is, so it might look kind of dopey, you know, if you don't know what it does. But I guess people who know what it does, it's a cool move. And that, of course, is like a very video game-ish kind of move there. It's like a finishing move, you know.
You have been a formidable opponent. I am sorry I have to end this game.
So that move is another shot inspired from Best of the Best. You know, when a guy puts his foot back like that, you know he's gonna try to kick your head off. So the whole gun thing is like, it didn't work the first time. How is Killer Bean going to make it work the second time? And with him ejecting that bullet, I wanted people to be like, what the heck is he gonna do? Alright, he's tossing it up, and is he gonna try to kill him there? But in reality, this is his whole plan of shooting one bullet to make that bullet kill Jet Bean, and that actually catches him off guard. So it took so long to figure out how to end this fight, you know. How was I gonna end this fight? Sometimes, or most of the time actually, ending the story, ending a scene, or ending a fight is the most difficult thing to come up with when you're writing a screenplay or whatever, like a scene or a short or even a fight. The ending is the toughest thing to figure out. And usually if you have a good ending, then most of the time people think it's a good movie. So if you end well, everything's all happy, you know. So, and hopefully that ending of the fight was worked, you know. Hopefully it worked. Kind of capped off that whole fight. So I kind of wanted to intentionally show that this was Jet Bean's phone, you know, showing it's the same phone, but it had a secure connection, so hopefully I didn't overdo it with those shots.
I learned a lot about the Shadow Agency today, and it's not for me.
And this ending to the movie, this was an easy ending for me to think of because I wanted an open ending. I wanted to be able to lead into another project if I wanted to do it. And also with the character who Killer Bean is, just having him look at the guns and that's that. Like having him smile, that's who he is, you know? And that's basically... It was really an easy ending for me to figure out, you know? Because Killer Bean is really not a guy who has a really complicated plan. He's really a guy who goes from one thing to the next, one target to the next, you know? So, very simple-minded guy. And now he's driving off for his next thing, his next target, basically. So, fade to black, and that's it. That's my feature film directorial debut, and hopefully you guys liked it. So, here's the credits. Not many people worked on this movie, so credits are going to be quite short. But, yeah. That's it. And it took me a long time to make, and I'm eager to start something new. I don't know. It's probably not going to be Killer Bean, but it's going to have lots of action, whatever it is. So, yeah. So, check out my website for up-to-date news, jefflue.com or killerbeanforever.com. And by up-to-date, I mean like, you know, once in a while. So, yeah, and yeah, thanks for watching. Thanks for buying this DVD, and thank you, and hope you enjoyed it. All right? Okay, take care.